It was a cold and quiet morning in the small town of Riverban. The sun had not yet risen, but in a tiny studio behind a garage, a man sat on the floor, cradling 2 babies in his arms. Their cries filled the air, soft and desperate. His name was Joseph Carter, a poor but honest man. His twin daughters, only a few months old, were all he had left. Behind him, his wife Linda was throwing clothes into a bag, her face hard, her heart cold. "Linda, please," Joseph said in a weak voice, rocking the crying babies. "Please don't go. Don't leave me like this. Wait a little longer. Things will get better." Linda didn't look at him. She loudly zipped up her bag and carelessly tossed in her shoes. "I've waited long enough, Joseph," she said sharply. "I can't suffer like this anymore. Every day it's struggle, sweat, hunger, and shame. I'm tired." Joseph's voice trembled. "And the girls? They're just babies. Please, for their sake, Linda." "Not kindly, but bitterly," she replied. "You think I'm going to stay here and die with you in this garage? You've been fixing people's cars for years and still can't afford a proper home. Look at me. Look at them. We deserve better." The babies cried louder, as if begging her to stay. Joseph slowly stood, a baby in each arm. His shirt was stained with oil, his eyes red from sleepless nights. "Please, Linda. I'll work harder. I'll find more clients. Stay with me. Don't abandon our girls. They need you." She gave the babies a brief glance, then turned away. "That's your problem now." With that, Linda opened the door and walked out, slamming it behind her. Joseph stood in shock. He looked down at his daughters, still crying. He didn't cry or shout. He simply whispered, "It's okay. Daddy's here." That night, Joseph didn't sleep. He stayed awake, holding his daughters, warming milk on a small stove. His body was tired, but his mind found no rest. The next morning, he carried them to his workshop, a rusty tin structure with broken tools and a single wooden bench. He settled the girls in a small cot he had built from scrap wood and got to work. Customers came and went, some paying in coins, others asking to pay later. Joseph didn't complain. He smiled through it all, wiping sweat with his sleeve and checking on his daughters between repairs. But not everyone was kind. Some laughed at the sight of him with 2 babies in a workshop. "Poor man," one shouted. "You're broke, yet you had time to make kids. Why didn't you wait until you had money before marrying?" Another sneered. "Imagine a mechanic raising kids. Those children have no chance." Joseph heard it all. He swallowed the insults and focused on his work. That evening, he closed his shop and sat with his daughters outside the small room he called home. "I may not have much," he said softly, "but I have you, and I promise to give you the future you deserve. You won't grow up in shame." One day, his old friend Brian visited. Brian was a taxi driver who once worked in the same garage as Joseph. "Joe, you look exhausted," Brian said. "This life is too hard, brother. Why not give the girls up for adoption? Take them to an orphanage. At least they'll be cared for." Joseph turned to him slowly. "Never." Brian raised his eyebrows. "Why suffer like this? You're just hurting and smiling. You smile on the outside, but I know you cry at night." Joseph looked at his daughters, then at his friend. "No matter how hard it is," he said, "I'll never abandon them. They're my joy, my hope. One day, these girls will make me proud. They'll stand tall. I'll do whatever it takes, even if it kills me." Brian shook his head. "You're too stubborn." Joseph smiled. "No, I'm a father." Joseph spent every penny feeding his daughters and saving for their education. He didn't buy new clothes. He skipped meals. He walked everywhere. He never complained. Years passed. Joseph worked from sunrise to sunset, fixing cars, motorcycles, anything with an engine. His hands were always greasy, his back ached every night, but it didn't bother him. Isabella and Ivana were now 17, and it was time for college. Both had aced their entrance exams. Their dream? To study medicine. "Papa," Ivana said one evening, "do you really think we can do it?" Joseph smiled. "You've already succeeded in my eyes. But yes, you'll go to school. You'll wear white coats and help people, I promise. But deep down, he was worried. There was no money. Tuition was high. Books, housing, transport. It was more than he'd ever earned in a year. He stared at his mechanic shop, the same place he'd worked for over 20 years, the one his father had left him. It was old, but still standing. It was all he had. That night, Joseph made a decision. The next morning, he called Brian to the shop. "Brian," he said, "I've made a decision. I want to sell the shop." Brian dropped the teacup he was holding. "You're doing what?" "I want to sell the shop. I need money to send Isabella and Ivana to college." Brian looked shocked. "Joe, do you hear yourself? You want to sell your only source of income to educate girls?" Joseph nodded. Brian laughed. "Girls, Joe, not boys. They'll end up in the kitchen. They'll marry and forget everything. You're going to ruin yourself for this?" Joseph looked him in the eye. "They're my daughters, Brian, not my mistakes." Brian stood. "Joseph, you've lost your mind. Those girls will marry a rich man tomorrow and forget you exist. You should keep your shop and train boys instead." Joseph smiled softly. "No, Brian. That's where you're wrong. These girls are my pride. I'd rather sell everything I own and see them succeed than keep my shop and watch their dreams die." He paused, then added, "And if their husbands aren't proud of them, I will be." Brian said nothing more. He shook his head and walked away. A few days later, Joseph visited Mr. Marshall, a businessman who had once offered to buy the shop. "I'm ready to sell," Joseph said. "Are you sure?" Mr. Marshall asked. "This place is your life." Joseph nodded. "Now, my daughter's future is my life." Mr. Marshall gave him a fair price, not too high, but enough to cover tuition, housing, and books. Back home, Joseph gathered his daughters and handed them the money in an envelope. "What's this?" Isabella asked. "It's your start," he said. "Go chase your dreams." "Where did you get this?" Ivana asked, puzzled. "I sold the shop." Their eyes widened. "No, Papa, you didn't?" "Yes," he said firmly. "It wasn't just a shop. It was a bridge. And now that you're crossing it, I can let it go." Tears streamed down their cheeks. They hugged him tightly. "We'll make you proud," they both said. "You already have," he replied. The next week, they left for college. Joseph stood at the gate watching the bus disappear down the road. He didn't cry. He smiled. Not because he'd lost his shop, but because he'd planted greatness and was now watching it grow. At college, everything seemed big and new. Tall buildings, crowded lecture halls, new faces, a new life. They remembered their father's words before they left. "Focus on your books. Don't follow the crowd. Make me proud." So every day, they woke early, attended classes, studied, and stayed out of trouble. They knew their father had given up everything for them. They couldn't afford to let him down. Back home, Joseph no longer had a shop. He didn't have much to do, but he wasn't sad. Every time he thought of his daughters studying at college, his heart filled with joy. Neighbors mocked him. "Joseph, you're jobless now. What will you eat? Didn't we tell you? Those girls will forget you soon." But Joseph always smiled and said, "My daughters will come home as doctors. You'll see." Sometimes Isabella and Ivana called. "Papa, how are you?" Isabella would ask. "I'm fine, my angel. How's school?" "It's tough, but we're trying. We passed all our exams." "Good. Keep going. Your reward is coming." Sometimes they didn't have enough money for food or books, but they never told Joseph. They didn't want to stress him. Instead, they went hungry and still attended classes with smiles. They believed in their father's dream for them. One evening, Ivana had a headache and was lying on the bed when Isabella walked in with 2 cups of porridge. "No sugar, no milk," Isabella said with a laugh. "But it's still food," Ivana replied. "Thank God." They sat on the bed, sipping slowly. "Remember when Papa gave us biscuits with the money he earned changing tires?" Ivana asked. "I remember," Isabella said. "He never ate but always made sure we did. We have to finish what he started." "We will," Ivana said. That night, they made a silent promise. They would never waste their father's sacrifice. Years passed, and the day finally came. Graduation. The girls proudly wore their white coats, Dr. Isabella and Dr. Ivana. They stood on the stage, certificates in hand, smiling through tears. Cameras flashed, people clapped, but they only wanted to see one man, their father. He was sitting in the front row, dressed in a fine suit they'd bought him. As they stepped off the stage, they ran to him and knelt. "Papa, we did it." Joseph tried to speak, but no words came. Only tears. Tears of joy. He hugged them tightly and whispered, "You've made me the richest man in the world." That evening they returned home, and Joseph sat outside staring at the stars. He remembered the insults, the hunger, the endless work days, the day he sold his shop. And now, his daughters were doctors. He looked up and said softly, "Thank you, God." After their graduation, Isabella and Ivana sat their father down one evening. The living room was quiet, the air charged with excitement. "Papa," Isabella began, holding his hand, "we have something to tell you." Joseph looked at his daughters curiously. "What is it, my angels?" Ivana smiled brightly. "We didn't just graduate, Papa. We saved all the money we earned from our side jobs and got a government loan." Joseph's eyes widened. "A loan? For what?" Isabella squeezed his hand gently. "We built a hospital, Papa. A big hospital. We named it Carter Hope Medical Center." Joseph's jaw dropped. He couldn't believe his ears. You built a hospital?" "Yes, Papa," they said together, laughing and crying at once. Tears welled in Joseph's eyes. His hands trembled. "My girls," he whispered, "you're building lives now. You're saving the world." They hugged tightly, crying and laughing together. It was a dream come true, a dream that began with tears, grease, and hunger, but now shone brighter than gold. The hospital was magnificent. Tall, sparkling windows, pristine white walls, fresh flowers at the entrance, nurses and doctors walking proudly in uniforms, and a shiny new white SUV parked proudly by the grand entrance. Joseph was treated like a king. Every time he visited the hospital, everyone called him Papa Carter with deep respect. He never worked or walked anywhere again. His daughters ensured he had everything he needed: a beautiful home, drivers, caregivers, and all the love in the world. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. A woman was rushed to the emergency room, gravely ill and unconscious. She looked weak, hungry, and broken. Her friend ran in, pleading, "Please, help her. She has no money right now, but we'll pay later. Please save her." The hospital had rules. Patients usually had to pay a deposit first. But Isabella and Ivana, standing in the ER, looked at each other. "We can't let her die," Isabella said. "No, we can't," Ivana agreed. They turned to the patient's friend. "We'll save her life, but please, while we work, try to find some money." The woman fell to her knees, crying and thanking them. "God bless you. You have hearts of gold." The doctors took the patient to the operating room, doing their best to save her. Weeks passed, and the woman slowly recovered. She was given a small cleaning job at the hospital to help repay her debt. She worked quietly, always avoiding eye contact, her heart filled with shame and fear. She didn't know that the two doctors she often saw laughing and helping patients were her own daughters. One quiet Saturday afternoon, Joseph was bored at home. He missed the hospital, the nurses, and especially his daughters in their uniforms. He called James, their driver. "James, get the car ready. I want to visit my girls." "Yes, Papa Carter," James replied cheerfully. Joseph dressed in fine clothes, a crisp shirt and trousers his daughters had bought him. He wore a gold wristwatch and polished shoes. He looked like a man who had conquered life. The black SUV glided through the city streets and stopped at the hospital gate. "Hello, Papa Carter," the nurses greeted joyfully. He smiled and waved. "Hello, my children." He stepped out of the car and headed toward the main entrance, ready to surprise his daughters. But suddenly something caught his eye. A woman stood near the cleaning closet, mopping the floor. Her back was hunched, her hair rough, her clothes old and faded. Joseph stopped walking. He stared at the woman with the mop. His heart raced. Could it be? He took a few more steps and saw her face. Joseph froze, staring at the woman. His heart pounded. It was her, Linda, the same woman who had left him 20 years ago without looking back. The same woman who had left him with 2 crying babies because he had no money. Now she stood before him, tired, old, and bent by life's hardships. Her face, once so beautiful, was marked by pain and regret. Her hair was coarse, her cleaning uniform worn. Joseph stepped forward slowly and whispered, "Linda." The woman turned slowly. When her eyes met his, she froze. She dropped the mop, her hands trembling, tears instantly welling in her eyes. "You work here?" Joseph asked, his voice full of disbelief and sadness. Linda collapsed, unable to speak for a few seconds. Then through her tears she nodded. "Yes, yes." Joseph's heart was heavy. He didn't know what to say. Linda wiped her face with the back of her hand and spoke quickly, her words trembling. "Please, don't hate me. Let me explain." Without waiting for his response, she led him to a quiet corner behind the hospital where no one could hear them. They sat on a bench. Linda stared at her hands for a long moment before speaking. "I was sick," she said. "I had no money. I begged the hospital to treat me. A kind doctor agreed and saved my life. They said I could work here and pay little by little." Joseph listened without a word. Linda looked up at him with desperate eyes. "My rich husband threw me out," she said bitterly. "He said I was worthless because I couldn't have children. A few years later, he married another woman. Since I left you, I could never have children again." Her whole body shook with grief. "I lost everything, Joseph. My home, my health, my pride. And now, I clean floors to survive." She fell to her knees, crying so hard that Joseph had to look away to keep from breaking down. "I'm sorry, Joseph," she sobbed. "I'm sorry for how I treated you. I was young and foolish. I didn't see your love. I didn't understand your heart. Please, even if the girls never forgive me, even if you never want to see me again, forgive me." Silence fell, broken only by Linda's sobs and the distant sounds of hospital staff. Joseph's heart was heavy. He remembered that cold morning years ago when he stood at the door, begging her to stay while she laughed and left with her bag. But he also remembered the promise he'd made to never let bitterness take root in his heart. He looked at her gently. "Linda," he said slowly, "do you know which hospital you're working in?" She shook her head, wiping her nose. Joseph took a deep breath and said, "This hospital belongs to your daughters, Isabella and Ivana. They built it. They're the ones who saved your life." Linda's eyes widened in horror. "It's true," Joseph said softly. "The same babies you left behind. The ones you said were my problem. They're doctors now. This hospital is theirs." Linda collapsed on the ground, crying so hard that some staff turned to look. She had never felt such shame in her life. At that moment, Isabella and Ivana stepped out of the building, laughing with some nurses. They stopped when they saw their father talking to a crying woman. "Papa!" Isabella called, waving. Linda turned quickly, trying to hide her face. Joseph motioned for them to come closer. When they were near, Ivana looked at the woman curiously. Something felt strange. Linda turned slowly, tears streaming down her face. In a broken voice, she said, "I'm not just a cleaner. I'm your mother." She paused, then added, "Please, my daughters, forgive me." Silence. The world seemed to stop. Isabella and Ivana stood frozen, incredulous. Their mother, the woman who had abandoned them, who never looked back. Linda fell to her knees. "I have no excuse," she cried. "I made the worst mistake of my life. I gave up love for empty promises. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm sorry." The girls stood speechless, tears welling in their eyes. They looked at their father, the man who had loved them, carried them, suffered for them. And they thought of all the lessons he'd taught them: love, forgiveness, grace. Slowly, Isabella stepped forward. She knelt and took her mother's hands. "You may not deserve our forgiveness," she said softly, "but we forgive you." Ivana knelt too, hugging her mother tightly. "Because Papa taught us," she said through tears, "that forgiveness is stronger than hate." Joseph stood there, wiping his eyes proudly. A month passed since Linda moved into the house with Joseph and their daughters, Isabella and Ivana. From the outside, everything seemed calm. The house was peaceful. They shared meals and exchanged smiles, but deep in Joseph's heart, he wasn't truly happy. He couldn't forget. Every morning, seeing Linda brought back the memory of that painful day when she walked out, leaving 2 crying babies in his arms and disappearing without a glance back. That afternoon, after Isabella and Ivana left for work, Joseph was sitting on the balcony, reading a newspaper, when Linda came to sit beside him. She looked at him carefully for a few seconds, then spoke. "Joseph," she said softly, "it's been a month since I came back to this house. I've apologized. I've tried to change. I've cooked, cleaned, and helped around the house. I think it's time we got back together, as husband and wife." Joseph slowly folded the newspaper and placed it on the table. Then he looked her in the eye and shook his head. "No, Linda. Never." Linda's face darkened. "Why?" Joseph sighed and said calmly, "I don't even like the idea of you living in the same house as me. I wake up every day and see you, and every time, I remember that cold morning when you left me and the girls." Linda's lips trembled. "I said I was sorry." "I know, and I've forgiven you," Joseph said, standing. "But forgiving doesn't mean going back to what we had. I told Isabella and Ivana to find you a separate house, but they refused. They said you could stay here to keep me company when I'm bored." He paused, then looked at her firmly. "But to be honest, Linda, you don't bring me peace. You don't bring me joy. You bring back pain. So no, we can never be together again." Linda stood, furious. "So that's it?" she exclaimed. "After all I've done to humble myself and live under the same roof, you're still pushing me away? What do you feel?" Joseph remained calm. "I feel like a man who found peace after years of suffering, and I don't want to lose it." Linda raised her voice. "Oh, so you want your daughters to throw me out? Is that it, Joseph? You think I'm a dog to be chased away?" Joseph looked at her calmly. "I never asked them to throw you out. I just said I'm not comfortable with you." "You're cruel!" Linda shouted. "Cruel and proud. You still act like a lowly mechanic. You live in a mansion but talk like a fool." Joseph shook his head sadly. "You see, Linda, you haven't changed. That's why I said we can never be together. Not now. Never." Later that evening, Isabella and Ivana returned from the hospital. They immediately noticed the tension in the house. Joseph called them into his room. "My girls," he said softly, "I've been patient, but I need to speak from my heart. I'm not comfortable under the same roof as your mother. Please, find her a house. A comfortable one. Buy it or rent it, I don't mind. But I need peace." The girls looked at each other and nodded. "Okay, Papa," Ivana said softly. "We understand," Isabella added. "We'll find her a place this week. Your peace is our peace." They went to the living room and found Linda watching TV. "Mama," Isabella began gently, "Papa asked us to find you a house, a nice nearby place so you can visit whenever you want." Linda turned and stared at them, stunned. "What did you just say? This is punishment." "It's not punishment," Ivana said quickly. "It's just that Papa isn't comfortable. We want everyone to be happy." Linda stood slowly, her eyes burning. "So your father hasn't forgiven me," she snapped. "After all my begging, you're pushing me out now." "Mama, we're not pushing you out," Isabella said calmly. "We just want peace in this house." Linda hissed loudly. "That man is a wizard," she shouted. "He's old, poor in thought, and full of bitterness. He pretends to be at peace, but deep down, he's still the same angry mechanic." "Mama, stop," Ivana said softly. "Let's not say things we'll regret." "I regret nothing," Linda screamed. "Your father is heartless. If you really loved me, you'd ask him to leave instead." The girls fell silent, tears in their eyes. This wasn't what they'd hoped for. They thought forgiveness would heal everything, but some wounds were deeper than they'd imagined. Joseph sat quietly in his room, listening. Once again he whispered, "She hasn't changed." It was Father's Day. Early that morning, Isabella and Ivana were up, smiling and full of excitement. They had planned something special for their father. After weeks of searching, they had bought him a brand new, luxurious white SUV, a precious gift to honor the man who had given up everything for them. Joseph was sitting in the living room, reading the newspaper, unaware of their plan. "Papa," Isabella said, walking in. "Come outside, we want to show you something." "What is it?" he asked. "Come, Papa," Ivana added, laughing. They led him outside. Right in front of the house, covered with a red ribbon, was the car. Joseph stood still, puzzled. "What's this?" "It's yours," the girl said. "Our Father's Day gift," Isabella added. "You deserve the best." Joseph's eyes widened. "You bought me a car?" "Yes, Papa," Ivana said. "You gave us everything. Now it's our turn." Tears welled in his eyes. He touched the car gently, shaking his head. "I never dreamed of this day," he whispered. "I never thought I'd see this in my lifetime." He hugged his daughters tightly, crying with joy. The household staff clapped. It was a beautiful moment. But inside, someone wasn't happy. Linda stayed in her room, watching from the window. Jealousy filled her heart. Her face was hard. "They love him too much," she thought angrily. "And me?" She sat on the bed, seething. Later that evening, after the celebration, Isabella and Ivana went to her room. "Mama," Isabella said, knocking. "You didn't come out? Papa was asking for you." Linda opened the door slowly. "You both love that greasy mechanic more than me?" she snapped. Ivana blinked in shock. "What?" "Yes!" Linda shouted. "You treat him like a king, and me like nothing." "Mama, it's Father's Day," Isabella said calmly. "He raised us alone for 20 years. He gave us everything." Ivana took a deep breath. "Are you serious, Mama? You're angry because we celebrated our father on Father's Day?" "He doesn't deserve it," Linda screamed. "He's just an old fool, a dirty mechanic. You girls are blind." "Enough, Mama," Isabella said firmly. "We've had enough of your insults." Ivana nodded. "You should be ashamed. After everything Papa endured to raise us alone." "This is what you say about him?" Linda sneered. "If my useless ex-husband hadn't left me, I wouldn't even be here looking at his face." "You're only here because you were sick, broke, and needed help," Isabella retorted. "And we helped you, but now you spit in our faces." Linda rolled her eyes. "Whatever. You're like him, heartless and classless." Ivana's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was firm. "Enough. We tried, Mama. We really tried. But if you can't respect our father, you can't stay here." "What are you saying?" Linda asked, crossing her arms. "You're leaving this weekend," Isabella said. "We'll call the agency tomorrow to find you a nice apartment." Linda laughed bitterly. "So you're kicking me out? You're rejecting your own mother?" "No," Ivana said calmly. "You've rejected yourself. We're only at peace when you're not talking." Isabella added, "We'll pay for the apartment. We'll furnish it and provide for your needs. But not under our roof." Linda stared at them, her eyes burning. "You're both heartless, cold. You've chosen him over me." "No," Ivana said softly. "We've chosen love. We've chosen peace." Linda stormed into her room, slamming the door behind her. The girls stood in the hallway trembling. Joseph walked in from the balcony and hugged them. "You did the right thing," he said. "Some people don't change, even when given the chance." And they all agreed. It was time to write a new chapter. Deep down, Joseph finally felt something he hadn't felt in years: relief. Months passed since Linda moved into her own apartment. At first, everything was calm. The girls paid her rent, furnished the apartment beautifully, and even sent her a monthly allowance to ensure her comfort. They thought that with time, she would heal, behave better, and live peacefully. But they were wrong. Terribly wrong. One Saturday afternoon, while Isabella and Ivana were working at the hospital, Carla, a childhood friend, burst into Ivana's office. "Ivana, Isabella, I heard something shocking about your mother." The sisters looked up from their files. "What happened?" Isabella asked, worried. Carla sat down, breathless. "People are talking. It's everywhere. Your mother is having an affair with a boy young enough to be her son." Ivana dropped her pen. "What?" Carla nodded. "Yes, a young guy, maybe 25. She's spending all the money you send her on him, buying him clothes, shoes, phones, even paying his rent." Isabella felt her heart race. "No way," she murmured. "She's even taking him out to eat and drink," Carla added. "People are mocking your family behind your backs." Isabella and Ivana exchanged a look. Their father's words echoed in their minds. She hasn't changed, and she never will. Without wasting a second, Isabella grabbed her phone and dialed Linda's number. Linda was at home, laughing loudly with the young man when her phone rang. Seeing it was Isabella, she huffed and answered lazily. "What is it?" "Mama," Isabella said, initially calm. "We heard something today. We heard you're having an affair with a young boy and spending the money we send you on him. Is it true?" There was a brief silence, then Linda burst out laughing. "So what if it's true?" she said boldly. "Yes, I'm spending my money on someone who makes me happy. That boy puts out the fire that's been burning in me since your useless father refused to take me back." The girls couldn't believe their ears. Isabella's voice rose sharply. "Mama, how could you? After everything we've done for you? After all the respect we've shown you?" Linda hissed loudly. "Respect? Keep it to yourself? I'll spend my money how I want. If you don't like it, go jump in a river." Ivana trembled with anger. "Your money?" she shouted. "The money we worked day and night for? You're shameless." Linda laughed harder. "At least this boy knows how to make a woman feel alive, unlike your dry, useless father." That was the final straw. Isabella's face turned red with anger. "Listen, Linda. As of today, we're not sending you a single penny ever again. Never. When your money runs out, pack your bags and go back to the village. Or better yet, go to hell if you want." Linda hissed again. "You're just like your father, cruel and classless." "And you're a shameless old woman," Isabella retorted. "We're done with you," Ivana added. Without another word, Isabella hung up and placed the phone on the table. The two girls sat, panting, too angry to speak. After Isabella and Ivana hung up that day, Linda sat in her apartment, seething with rage. She threw her phone across the room and screamed, "That man has ruined my daughters for me!" She paced the living room like a lioness ready to pounce. "I have to take them back," she muttered. "I can never lose. Never." She was convinced that if Joseph were gone, she could regain control of the girls. She'd force them to love her, respect her, and spend all their money on her. But trouble was already knocking at her door. A month later, Linda's situation worsened. Her daughters had completely stopped sending her money, as promised. Bills piled up. Rent was due. She could no longer live the lavish life she once did. The young man she was seeing, the one she'd spent all her money on, began to change. He stopped calling, stopped visiting, and started avoiding her messages. One evening, Linda managed to corner him in town. She blocked his path and demanded angrily, "Why are you ignoring me? I thought you loved me." The young man looked at her coldly and said, "Look, I'm done. I can't be with an old woman with no money." Linda's mouth fell open in shock. "What did you just say?" The boy laughed. "I've found someone else, someone young, someone who doesn't beg for love and attention." Linda stood trembling like a tree. The boy brushed past her and walked away without looking back, laughing with his new girlfriend. Linda stood in the middle of the street, humiliated and broken. Tears welled in her eyes. Her pride was gone. Her money was gone. And now, even the foolish boy she'd given everything to had discarded her like trash. That night, she sat in her dark living room, her heart filled with anger and shame. "I have to take back my daughters," she said, gritting her teeth. "I have to get rid of that old wizard, Joseph. He's the one standing between me and my destiny." Her mind grew darker. The next week, she contacted a dangerous man from the shady side of town. She paid him the little money she had left and gave him a mission. "First," she said coldly, "deal with that foolish boy who used me and dumped me." The man agreed. Within 3 days, news spread through the town. The young boy had been found dead under mysterious circumstances. Linda smiled when she heard. "One down," she thought mercilessly. Then she called the man again. "Now," she said, "I have another mission for you." "Who?" the man asked. "My ex-husband, Joseph Carter. I want him out of my way. He's the reason my daughters hate me. Without him, they'll be mine again." The man nodded but warned her. "This one will cost more." "I don't care," Linda shouted. "Finish him. I need to take back my daughters. I need to control everything." Her mind was dark. She no longer cared about right or wrong. All she cared about was power. All she cared about was money. And she was ready to destroy anyone who stood in her way, even if it meant destroying the only man who had ever truly loved her. It was a quiet afternoon. Joseph was home alone. His daughters, Isabella and Ivana, were at the hospital working. The house was silent. Joseph sat in the living room, resting and reading his Bible. Suddenly there was a soft knock at the door. He got up slowly and opened it. Outside stood a man, rough-looking, with tired eyes. Joseph had never seen him before. The man looked at Joseph and froze, shocked. He stared for a long moment, eyes wide. Joseph frowned slightly. "Can I help you?" he asked. The man shook his head slowly and stepped forward. "You don't remember me?" he said in a low voice. Joseph shook his head. "No, I don't." The man took a deep breath, his voice trembling with emotion. "Years ago, when my family had nothing, when we were starving, you helped us. You gave my father money. You bought us food. You saved us when no one else cared." Joseph looked at him closely, trying to remember. "My father never forgot you," the man continued. "Before he died, he made me promise that if I ever saw you in trouble, I'd help you, no matter the cost." Joseph's gaze softened. "Sir, I don't have much time," the man said. "Your ex-wife, Linda, paid me to kill you." Joseph stepped back, shocked. The man continued quickly. "I already did one job for her. I'm the one who killed the young boy she was seeing. But now, the police are investigating. I know they'll catch me soon. I have to leave the country." Joseph's hands trembled. The man lowered his head and said, "Because of what you did for my family, I can't harm you. I came to warn you. Take action against your ex-wife. She's an evil creature. Protect yourself and protect your daughters." Before Joseph could say a word, the man turned and disappeared down the street, carrying only a small bag. Joseph stood at the door, trembling. His heart raced. He immediately grabbed his phone and called his daughters. "My angels, come home now," he said urgently. "Something terrible is happening." Minutes later, Isabella and Ivana rushed home. Joseph sat them down and told them everything. Linda's wicked plan to kill him, and how the man had confessed because of the kindness Joseph had shown years ago. The girls were shocked, speechless. Without wasting time, they called the police and gave them all the details. The police acted swiftly. That same evening, Linda was arrested. At the trial, the truth came to light. Linda was charged with 2 crimes, orchestrating the murder of her young boyfriend and attempting to do the same to Joseph. She showed no shame in court. She stood proudly, refusing to express any regret. But the judge was unmoved. Linda was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Joseph and his daughters didn't attend the final hearing. They stayed home, thanking God for sparing their family from greater pain. Months later, happiness returned. Isabella and Ivana got married on the same day, surrounded by love and peace. The wedding was filled with laughter, music, family, and true joy. Joseph sat proudly in the front row, tears of joy streaming down his cheeks. He watched his daughters, now strong and accomplished women, walk down the aisle with radiant smiles. He knew that despite all the battles he'd fought, the pain, betrayal, loneliness, love, kindness, and patience had triumphed. This story teaches us that when you sow love and kindness, it returns to protect you. Evil may triumph for a moment, but goodness always prevails in the end. Patience, love, and honesty will always shine brighter than greed and hatred. Dear viewers, what lesson did you take from this dramatic story? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe. Don't forget to turn on notifications to stay updated with our latest content. Thank you for watching, and may God bless you.